super excited to welcome Christina Villa from the Farmers Land Trust and Hannah Breckbill from Humble Hands Harvest, a worker-owned cooperative here in my neck of the woods. Um, and I'll just give a quick introduction to both of these wonderful people, and I'll let them take it away. So Christina Villa is a farmer, communicator, and community coordinator who believes that our connection to the soil is directly related to the health of our bodies, economy, and society. With farming, communication, and fundraising experience, Christina uses her skill sets to share photos, stories, and information to inspire change in mindsets, causing the food system, climate, and overall well-being of the world to improve. Most of her work in the land access space is focused on equitable land security for BIPOC growers, addressing the inequities and disparities in how land is owned and accessed in this country. And then Hannah Breckbill is a farmer owner of Humble Hands Harvest, worker-owned cooperative in Decorah, Iowa, and has been farming since 2009 when she interned as a CSA manager at World Hunger Relief outside of Waco, Texas. Hannah moved to Decorah in 2019 and founded Humble Hands Harvest in 2013. Hannah farms full-time at Humble Hands and works as a land access navigator with Practical Farmers of Iowa. She serves many boards in her community, including the Sustainable Iowa Land Trust and the Driftless Young Farmers Coalition chapter. She's a queer four-part harmony singing Mennonite and spends her winters dreaming, building resilience, and organizing for climate resilience and justice. Welcome to both of our speakers. We'll have Christina take it away here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This all has been already so exciting. Piper, you're so great. Thank you. And yeah, I'm so excited to hear your talk after this, Hannah. So really excited. I really want to thank the Women Food and Agriculture Network for hosting this and putting this together and creating this space for us all to come together and share and learn. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm so grateful and excited to see so many familiar faces and names on this Zoom call from all over the country. This is so great. I love how this virtual world can be disconnecting at times, but how we're finding creative ways to make it more connecting. So really grateful for that. So yeah, my name is Christina Villa. I live in Middle Tennessee. My partner and I have a farming business. We grow vegetables using organic and biodynamic methods. We sell to restaurants, grocery stores, CSAs. We also have a herd of dairy cows and sell raw milk. And we don't own the land we farm on. We do pay a voluntary land tax to the indigenous groups whose land this rightfully is, which is the Cherokee, Choctaw, and Shawnee. And I want to encourage everyone to find out whose land you're on and to move from just a simple land acknowledgement to action, to paying that monthly voluntary land tax as a step in the right direction to rectifying and healing the past and current harms. You can do that at Native Land Net. I also wanted to share that I have my email on this slide, and I offer that to anyone to go ahead and jot down and copy down as part of this relationship and partnership with the Women Food and Agriculture Network. We at the Farmers Land Trust are offering that if you would like to talk more in depth about your personal situation and ask further, deeper questions beyond this presentation, that I invite you to reach out via email, and I'd love to connect and talk more. So why are we all here? And why does the Farmers Land Trust even exist? We are at a moment of multiple points of crisis. We are losing over 2,000 acres from agriculture every single day, and every single day, over 37 mid-sized farms close. At the same time, every single bit of land that we are on has been stolen through racism and force and violence and genocide. 98% of the land in this country is owned by white people, and that is incredibly unjust. Land access is the #1 barrier for farmers who are entering farming. And at the same time, retiring, aging farmers have no way to exit farming and to enter into comfortable retirement other than to sell their land on the open market. Land prices are astronomical. Land prices have appreciated by over 40% per decade, meaning that previous generations of farmers were able to access land much more easily than young and beginning farmers can today. We're up against corporate land grabbing, investment land grabbing, and this all begs the question of where is our food going to come from in the future? Where will we grow food, and how will we have a connection to land in the future at this moment where so many are so disconnected from land and food and community? There are 400 million acres of land in transition in this decade and next. That is over 45% of this country's agriculture land is going to change hands in the next couple of decades. Most ideally, all of that land is given back to Indigenous people. Ideally, that land is given to Afro-Indigenous Black people who, through reparations. But thinking that there are going to be some people who would like to see land transition through a land trust model, this farmland commons and the Farmers Land Trust is taking an opportunity to use land trusts in a different way. So we don't want to get in the way of reparations or rematriation, and we don't want to get in the way of land being returned to Indigenous people. And we want to offer that to anyone and everyone as a first choice. But for people who would like to use a land trust structure, the Farmers Land Trust is offering a way to put land back in community and give secure, equitable land access and tenure to people who want to grow food for communities. So before we start talking about the Farmers Land Trust and the Farmland Commons, I thought first we could get grounded in what land trusts are. So the first type of land trust was a conservation land trust. That's the type of land trust that's been around the longest. So the very first one was in the late 1800s. It was created, and it's the Trustees of Reservations. That name, I think, could share what they were mostly about, and they continue today. So a typical conservation land trust uses a conservation easement, which is a tool that has done really wonderful work in protecting land from development. There is a lot of land that has been saved from development from conservation easements, and for that, we are super grateful. Conservation easements mostly exist to protect land, to restrict the uses on land, so to keep development from happening, to keep logging from happening. But they do not address access, ownership, use, or tenure, and mostly have existed to perpetuate white wealth. In a conservation land trust, all decision-making and governance is centralized at the top board. So even a conservation land trust that works around the country, all decisions and power and authority is held in that top tier board. So the new, different kind of land trust is a community land trust, and that functions very differently than a conservation land trust. The very first community land trust ever was an act of Black liberation. It was 1969, and there was racism. It was the height of the civil rights movement. And the very first community land trust was New Communities Land Trust down in Georgia. And this was created as a farm. It had a focus on agriculture. We actually have a blog on the Farmers Land Trust that goes more into this land trust and other land trusts if you'd like to check that out. But so the very first community land trust, this New Communities Land Trust, was focused around agriculture, and it was with an understanding that communities needed to own the land to be able to produce food. They needed to be able to own their housing to be able to be secure and have secure long-term tenure and power and control over what they were living in and working in and doing. Since then, the community land trust model has evolved and has gone away from an agriculture focus and is now more focused on the built environment, housing, real estate, and it operates in a different sort way. So community land trusts mostly are hyper local and very focused on that local community. And they operate how they own land, but then the buildings on top of the land a community land trust owns is owned by the people who live in them. And so that is called a ground lease, is how they operate typically. So in this model, the board of the local community land trust is local people, and it does give equity building components to the people who are living in there, but they do lack a national scope and additional resources and connections to entities that the conservation land trust does have. And so at the Farmers Land Trust, it's a new kind of land trust. We've taken the very best parts of the conservation land trust and the community land trust and put them together into something that goes beyond just conservation and goes beyond just securing land and housing for communities, and created this commons land trust to address access, ownership, tenure, equity, all of these things that we know are important. And so, yeah, that brings us to the Farmers Land Trust. So, as I shared, I am the co-executive director of the Farmers Land Trust, and I co-lead this organization with Ian McSweeney, who is the other co-executive director. And we formed this organization to, yes, to address land access, but it is more than land access. The conversation needs to go beyond just land access to go to access and tenure, security, equitable land access, and affordability. We cannot just keep talking about land access. Farmers and growers need more. There's also such a focus on land access for new and beginning and historically disadvantaged farmers, and there's not enough focus on that other end of the equation, which is that retiring, aging out farmer who also is stuck. They've spent their entire life building soil, creating community, building infrastructure, making markets, and now they want to see their farm and their business and that land that they've taken care of by future generations. But how? We are in an economic system and a paradigm that is not working, and we need to be bold and be creative and take risks and try new things. And that is what we're doing with the Farmers Land Trust. And so we're doing this by creating farmland commons ourselves and by helping other communities, people, organizations create these farmland commons, which are new ways of being in relationship with land and holding land. So land commoning has been around since before this idea and concept of private property. This idea of private property is very westernized and is relatively new. Before anyone decided that we were going to put boxes on land and decide that a line in the sand created a different piece of land than what's over there, but before we had these crazy ideas, land was held in common. The people who were here before all of the genocide and violence and colonialism happened were holding land in common. And really, our focus is how do we get back to that while also understanding that these are the legal structures that we live in today. We have to realize and take into account that we are living in a world and we are living in this legal system.
Viviendo en un mundo, en un sistema.
Creatively use the legal structures that are available to us today to be in a different relationship with land and holding it in commons and community. This picture, I just have to say, this picture, my husband took this picture on the land that I shared that we don't own, but we grow food on, and it's
Nosotros
just
cultivamos en esta tierra. Es un recordatorio diario de que esta no es nuestra tierra. Es importante que la cuidemos, que la honremos y qué podemos hacer para sanar la tierra y sanarnos a nosotros mismos, porque estamos viviendo una desconexión con la tierra.
I'm gonna just interrupt you really quick. I think, Andreas, I think you're in the English room, possibly.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Sorry about that. Thanks, Christina.
Yeah. So these farmland commons that I'm about to share with you and the work of the Farmers Land Trust is all focused on creating a more just, equitable system for us all in how we grow food, how we relate to land, how land is held, and to go beyond land access to address security, affordability, tenure, and also to build community. Because this idea of a farmer being by themselves and being independent and this family farm that's isolated is killing us. This is not working. We need to be in community and we need to be able to rely on each other. And there has to be equity. Equity can mean multiple things. It can mean a resource that is drawn out of land later, or it can mean fairness and how things are accessed. And we mean both. There needs to be equity for the farmers accessing and having security on land, and we need to be equitable in how we are holding land, because right now it is very unjust. And our work is also focused specifically on regenerative, organic, chemical-free agriculture production, because that is how we are going to heal Earth, and that is where nourishing food comes from. So let's get into the Farmland Commons model. So a Farmland Commons is a 501c25 legal structure, and these entities that I'm about to share, this 501c25 and the next one is a 501c2, are IRS designated legal structures that have existed for a long time, but they have not ever been used like this. We are using existing legal structures in creative new ways to do something different. So this 501c25 is made when 3 at a minimum or up to 35 501c3 nonprofits come together to create this Farmland Commons. So these nonprofits could include the Farmers Land Trust, but they don't have to. It could be 3 other nonprofits who are coming together to create a Farmland Commons around the shared values and vision and goals that we're holding true to this model. So a minimum of 3 nonprofits come together to form this Farmland Commons. And then over time, additional nonprofits could join the structure and others could step away. So it is flexible and it brings resilience in the form of bringing multiple entities together to care for and support land. And I want to share here too that a reason that we have chosen this structure as the vehicle for our landholding model is because it gives access to philanthropic dollars through these nonprofits. So through the 501c3s that are part of this model, tax deductible donations can come in, grants can be gotten, and other philanthropic money can be gained, which we feel is so needed considering that land prices are completely out of touch with reality. A lot of money has been funneled into conservation land trusts, conservation easements to protect natural spaces, to protect habitats. But we need to have a shift in our focus as a culture and as a society to start funding and giving money to food production, to agriculture, to see the value in that sort of preservation and conservation, in addition to just natural bird habitats. So this is the 501c25 model. And alternatively, there is a 501c2 model, which is created by just a single 501c3 nonprofit. And so we're leaning further into the previous model because, as I said, it brings together more entities and creates more resilience. So these are limited scope landholding entities, both the 501c25 and the 501c2, which means many things. And so the reason to use these structures, in addition to what I've shared previously, is that because they are limited in scope to simply holding land, it means that they are not allowed to interfere in the day-to-day operations of the farmer, leaseholder, steward, rancher, whoever that may be, on the ground. It also means that existing nonprofits get to be a part of something, get to be involved in this mission of holding land for regenerative agriculture, for equity, for secure food production, and not get involved in mission creep and not take too much of their capacity and their organizational overhead. So these limited scope landholding entities do not require the same administrative duties or management or oversight as a 501c3 do. They're much more limited in scope. And that is a great quality of this, to have other 501c3s be part of it. And so how both of these work, both the 501c2 and the 501c3, are operated by a board of people. This board includes people who are from the parent nonprofit entities, and also the leaseholder. Whoever that farmer, steward, rancher is on the ground is part of the board. So they are part of that decision-making power, which is not true in that conservation land trust that we talked about. So that is a uniquely different part. Also on this board are other community members who support the land and who support that farmer, who provide technical assistance or business or legal or real estate support, education support. It is bringing together multiple stakeholders to be deeply connected with the farmer, steward, rancher on the ground, and also that land. But this board is limited in what they are allowed to do. So all this board does is create the terms of the lease and then create their budget for the year. So this budget is based on any fundraising that has already happened and then any leaseholder revenue. And the lease is determined by the board, which the farmer sits on themselves. So the farmer gets to be part of creating what their lease is going to be. Sometimes it's $0. Sometimes it's just the cost of taxes and insurance. There have been times where a farmer has decided that they're making plenty of money and they want to be paying a lease, because any money that comes in through the lease does not go back up to those parent 501c3s. Rather, that money gets reinvested back into the land, into that farm. So, as I mentioned, the leaseholder sits on the board, giving them power in decision making. And that board is all local community members, local to that geographic area. You know, so much land right now is held by absentee landowners who have full power and control over a piece of land that they're not even connected to, that they're not even near. So putting power and control of land back in community is a main function of this model. We also really like this model because out of all the legal structures, it gives the farmer, rancher, leaseholder the most autonomy and independence, which is really what people want. When new and beginning and young farmers talk about needing to own land, what they really mean is that they want independence, they want control, they want to be able to manage their farm in their way without people interfering. And the only way they know how to talk about that right now is through ownership. But there is another way. These are new ways of doing that. So through the lease is where all of the conservation language exists. So these leases are 99 years in most places. This is, you know, our organization works nationally. State laws differ in many places. Most states allow a lease to be at the maximum 99 years. And that's why we chose 99 years. If we could go higher than that, we would, but that's as long as most state laws will allow. In other states, they don't allow 99 years, in which case it would have to be adjusted for that specific state. But this lease is transferable from next generation farmer, or I'm sorry, from existing farmer to next generation farmer, meaning that if the leaseholder was an individual and their children wanted to take on the lease and farm in the future, that lease could be passed on to them. And it is a living document. So whereas a conservation easement is permanent, the lease gets to be revisited and it can meet the needs of the moment. We have experienced through our work over many years that in some cases, a conservation easement, although it was well-intentioned many decades ago, gets in the way of regenerative agriculture. You know, for instance, rotating cattle with electric fencing can be considered unsightly. And so that goes against a conservation easement. That's not to say that conservation easements don't have their place, and very often we work with other conservation land trusts to put conservation easements on land in addition to this model. We're just very careful about the language and how and where buildings can be put or what the stipulations are. So through this lease is where conservation language and also stewardship and use practices come into play. So there is a mandate that active food production agriculture has to happen on the land. Of course, there's time built in for life occurrences or health issues or natural disasters. And then there's also a lot of flexibility built in for the farmer and also equity building components. So similar to the ground lease that I spoke about with the community land trust, in this model, the leaseholder could own buildings and housing on the land, just not the land. So the commons, the farmland commons would own the land, but the leaseholder could own any housing or infrastructure. And also they could get equity from any improvements that they made to existing infrastructure. And this leaseholder could be many different things. This can look many different ways. This could be an individual. This could be an LLC. The leaseholder could also be a co-op or another nonprofit. It can look many different ways, to be a incubator farm or a training farm or. That is open to whatever is best for that community in that time. Covered all of these things. Feel good about that. And so often we get asked how other entities relate to this model. And so the farmland commons model is just to hold land and just to give secure, affordable tenure to people who are growing food and to put land ownership back into community and to decommodify land, taking land off of the private market forever so that it can never be bought and sold ever again. Conservation land trusts are often partners in this work. They maybe already have a conservation easement on the land and have vested interest in this land already and could work with them to put a conservation easement on a piece of land that doesn't have a conservation easement on it, maybe as a source of funding or as extra support for the land. Other nonprofits could be added as a C25 model, or other nonprofits could be the leaseholder. People often are interested in cooperatives and how those interact. And really, again, those would be the people who held the long-term secure lease on the land. Community land trusts could be partners to manage and hold ownership of and support other housing. And of course, privately owned real estate. Owners of real estate, landowners, can choose to donate land into this structure so that it can be decommodified and owned by none and all at the same time. This is very exciting part of this, is that this is all open resource. Every single bit of the Farmland Commons model is open resource and available for any and all to use. That's so exciting. You guys can use any of this you want because all people and all communities should have access to this. They should know how and have the resources and support for how to create this model on their own. And so what does this really mean? This means that anyone on this call, anyone out on the internet, anyone anywhere can access the documents that are the creation of the Farmland Commons, meaning the bylaws, the lease templates, all of the templates needed to create these legal structures, to hold these values, and to decommodify land, to take it off the private market, hold it in community, and give secure access and affordable tenure to farmers growing food for their communities can be accessed by anyone. You also can access these documents and these legal structures and these resources and supports without having to create a full farmland commons yourself. You could piece out and use just what's useful. For instance, if you're a farmer on this call needing secure land access, you could find a landowner who has land that's laying fallow that they don't want to give up control over, but that they do want to see agriculture practiced on. And you could use the lease template to enter into a lease arrangement with them. Maybe they are open to giving 99-year lease. Maybe they're open to the whole lease structure, except where they want to bring the years down to 25-year lease. But it's a step in the right direction, and you are fully welcome to use any of these documents. And that is something that is very inspiring to me, is that we are seeing that. We're seeing people who aren't ready to enter into this model fully, but who want to use a more creative lease that holds the values of regenerative agriculture and community stewardship. And so you are welcome to use those documents for that. So I was very fortunate. I got to see some of the registration questions as they came in, and I wanted to include some of the topics that people were sharing that they were really interested in. So I've shared about the farmland commons and the Farmers Land Trust and the work we do. And how does land come into the farmland commons is a question that often comes up. So land can either come in through full donation. Landowner wants to see land be farmed regeneratively, organically, but they don't want to put it on the open market. They know it's not going to be affordable to next generation farmers. And they also want it decommodified for forever. They want it held in perpetuity for agriculture for forever. So they donate land. We are in communication with landowners who have a lot of white wealth for generational wealth, and they want to see the land go to indigenous communities or Black communities, and they want to do it through this structure so that they know the land will be held in perpetuity for forever for these purposes. So they're interested in fully donating the land. In other times, land comes into the structure through a bargain sale or a discounted price. In that case, we work with landowner who has aligned values, who is interested in all of the things that this model offers, but they do need some money to exit, which is fully understandable. You know, we talked at the beginning about the aging out, retiring farmers who have spent their entire lives working on land and building soil and building community, and they deserve to be able to retire with dignity. So we do work with exiting farmers to come to an agreement on a sale price that is far below market value, below appraisal value, because land prices are out of touch with reality, but also gives them enough money to retire with dignity, in which case we would do a fundraiser in partnership with that local community and with the networks that we're involved in. So something else that was coming up was, how do we start a farmland commons? Well, the first thing would be, let's have a conversation. Let's talk. I shared my email. It'll be on the last slide too, but would love to talk with you. Also, these resources are available for anyone. You could just go get the templates and then start a farmland commons on your own. Obviously, if you want to reach out with questions, we're here to support, but you don't have to. You can do and make the model that works best for you in your community. But on our end, starting a farmland commons always starts with a piece of land. So these 501c2 and 501c25 entities are land holding entities. That's an IRS law, not a rule that we just made up. These are land holding entities. So it has to start off with a specific land project. Many times we are approached by incoming farmer or young and beginning farmer or farmer needing land, and they haven't yet identified land, in which case we share with them that a farmland commons has to start with a piece of land. And our suggestion always is to look at a map and decide, where do you want to be? And don't look on the market. Don't look on the market for land, because once land is already on the market, it is too late. That landowner has already decided that they need X amount of dollars. They're already thinking about what they're going to do with that money. Real estate agents are already involved. We just don't even bother looking at land on the market. What we suggest is look at a map, decide where you want to be, and then look at the courthouse tax records and see who owns that land, and then start reaching out. So after you decide how many acres you need or what infrastructure you need, you can just start reaching out to landowners who own land already that are in line with what your needs are. And you would be so surprised at how many landowners are holding on to land right now because they don't see a good option, and they're waiting for you to knock on their door and share these other possibilities. They want to see their land in regenerative agriculture. They want to see it go for social justice. They want that. They just don't know how. They don't know what that looks like. So oftentimes we reach out to landowners, call them on the phone, send them letters, share about our organization, about the work we do, about this young farmer who needs land, and just to see if there are conversations that can be had there. And so that brings us to a next question. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes. Okay. I did talk about that. Okay. So the next question is, what is the best way to begin conversations with landowners? So we get asked this a lot, and, you know, knocking on someone's door who you've never met and saying, hey, you should donate your land, this farmland common, that's probably not a good way. That might be a little too abrupt and abrasive for a first meeting. So first, it's important to build relationship. So getting to know them, knocking on their door, sharing about who you are, what your goals and dreams are, and really easing into the conversation. Maybe sharing a little bit about creative land holding models, about other options for use of land, like regenerative agriculture, or like putting land into a nonprofit land trust, or giving land back to community. And then sharing more information, maybe share a website, maybe share some helpful resources. It's really, this work is long and it is emotional. You know, the people with WFAN opened this up asking, like, what emotions do you have when you think about land? And there were a lot of emotions shared in this chat that are deep and exciting, but also painful and hard. And landowners feel that too. People are very connected to their land, and there's a lot of sadness and grief and also guilt and a lot of things tied up in land and history and family. And it is a touchy subject. And really, we have to go into this. When you're thinking about how to begin conversations with landowners, you also have to think that this is going to be a long-term conversation. This is going to take a long time, and that it's all based on relationship and trust. Every bit of this. When we're talking about transitioning land in creative and unique ways, we're not talking about transactional things. We're not talking about just putting the land on the market and seeing who the highest bidder is. We're talking about relationships and heart-centered decisions. And so going into conversations with landowners like that is really important. So how and where and when the farmland commons model works best is a really great question. And I saw that on some registration forms for this workshop. And I think that what I would share is that this really works best when there's already a farmer who's already growing food and just needs land. This whole model is a land holding model. Really, when we can plug in to just support the land holding and the real estate transition, that is when it works the best. When there's already a farmer who's already growing food for community, they just need security on land. They just need long-term tenure to be able to build soil, to be able to practice those regenerative practices and plant perennials and see the future of fruit trees. Like, they need security and long-term tenure. And that is where this model works best. It also works best when it's not just a piece of raw land that farmer is getting, when it is a farm that has already been an operating farm with infrastructure, with barns, with fencing. And I'm just sharing that this is when it works best. That's when it's like the most successful and the most wonderful, is when we can plug a farmer who's already farming into an actual farm. Ideally, that's the best case scenario. But of course, there are other ways and options when it works really wonderfully too. And as far as the greatest challenges and obstacles to this work, I would share that really it is about, well, there are many. I mean, this is new. This is creative, innovative work. This is challenging. We're taking risks. We're trying new things. So there are challenges for sure. One of those is, how do we challenge and change the mindset of people who have grown up in this westernized culture of understanding that private property ownership is the only way? That's one of the biggest challenges, is convincing people and showing them and educating them enough about other ways and models to let them know that they don't have to own land to be able to have deep, long-term relationship with land and to be able to get all of those benefits of land ownership out of it without actually owning a deed to the land. So holding land in common, community land ownership, just that mindset shift that it takes to get people there is one of the biggest challenges. Also, one of the largest challenges is that 98% of land is owned by old white men. Like that, that is a challenge. They have a very hard time letting go. People who have lived their whole lives on land and a farm and have run their own business and kind of been detached from reality and society in that way have a very difficult time of letting go and passing land on to the next generation. And that is a challenge. And that kind of comes back to that, what's the best way to enter in conversation with landowners? Like, it is relationship building. It takes time, and it takes a lot of effort and energy to build trust and relationship to get to that point of transition. But those would be some of the greatest challenges. Of course, fundraising is another one of them to acquire land. That takes a lot of creativity and focus, and thinking about different partnerships and collaborations. And it is a lot of work, but also utilizing the way that people have thought about putting money towards protecting land in other ways, and kind of shifting that focus to giving money not to just conserve land, but to support the type of food growing agriculture and community support that we all know is needed to address so many of the issues that we're facing today. So as a recap, the Farmland Commons utilizes bylaws, articles of incorporation, deed encumbrance, lease agreements, several partnerships, a lot of nestling of different entities to bring about this commoning, to bring about this community-supported landholding, community-supported access, tenure, equity, all of these things. And I think that very often people can be put off by thinking, oh, this isn't accessible to me, or oh, this sounds too challenging and hard, but it's not. And we are here to support you in this, because there has to be a different way. If we continue on the path that we are on right now, we're not going to be here much longer. Our earth is dying, and food access and land access are so incredibly unjust. We have to try new things. We have to be brave and innovative, and we have to take risks. And we're all here to do this together. So yeah, we would really be grateful if you went to our website and signed up for our newsletter. Follow us on your favorite social media, like not just Facebook and Instagram, although we are there too, but also TikTok and LinkedIn, or whatever your favorite social media is. Go check us out. And yeah, contribute to this with a donation. We would be so grateful. And like I said at the beginning, here's my email address. And as part of this partnership with Women Food and Agriculture Network, we're offering a more in-depth conversation with any and all of you about your specific needs, goals, dreams, and how we can support that. And yeah, thank you very much. I look forward to the question and answer session after Hannah's talk, and I'm so excited to hear Hannah's talk.
Thank you so much, Christina. Yeah, just so much rich information, and really grateful that it's all open source and that you're able to share it with us. We'll probably get into more of the legal nitty gritty as we talk in the Q&A. Both of our presenters are well versed in that and make it hopefully digestible for all of us. And we'll also be sharing out a resource list following this call. Right now, I want to give everyone a chance to warm up their coffee, go stretch. I'm going to go pet my cat. And I think we will meet back here at 10:45 for Hannah. I'll turn it over to our second speaker, Hannah Breckbill, who is going to introduce herself a little bit more. And Hannah is a farmer and land access navigator here in the upper Midwest with the Farmland Access Hub. And so I think that there was some mention of that in the chat, but just wanted to shout that out right away so that folks know about it. It's really great. Yeah, go ahead and take it away, Hannah.
All right. Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's really exciting to hear about the Farmers Land Trust and all of the commoning things that are available to us now. And I'm just going to tell my story a little bit of how I got into farming and how our farm created some of the structures that we made that are pointing us at any rate toward commoning. So yeah, I'll just get going. I'm a first generation farmer. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. This is me with my hamster. And I grew up in an academic household. So I come with a lot of like white privilege and kind of a certain class that was expected of me and um yeah, that I grew up in. So my parents are musicologists, and I went to school expecting to become a math professor. Um, and I'm a very like idealistic person, and I'm kind of proud of how I'm naive. I like believe in things and just go for it, which again is also probably a product, a little bit of privilege, but it was also a product of kind of personality. Um, and I'm super with my idealism, I'm super motivated toward working on behalf of groups and causes. I'm a very social person. So after a few years in college as a math major, I kind of realized I want to be doing something a little bit more social, a little bit more that touches people's lives than a math professorship did in my mind at that time. And so I was looking around at kind of activist opportunities or ways to work for causes and for things. And the local food movement caught my attention. And yeah, it felt like a place that I could do real work and impact the lives of people around me. So that's how I got into farming. Um, I I rented land for 4 years after having worked on vegetable farms for about 3 years after college. And um I had an opportunity to rent 2 acres of land to grow vegetables for restaurants. And so I started that in 2013, and started Humble Hands Harvest as an individual farmer, kind of sole proprietor. I knew for a long time that I didn't want to ultimately work by myself, but the opportunity was kind of too good to pass up, and I was on that trajectory in my life. So I started Humble Hands Harvest by myself. And I never, ever expected to own land. As Christina was talking about, land prices are just so out of range for a like vegetable farmer income that it wasn't even on my radar. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was thinking about like, how can I find little chunks of other people's land to rent so that I can grow food for my community. But as I started kind of developing as a farmer, I started learning about regenerative agriculture, and I started learning about perennials and how important they are to our kind of ecosystems, and to soil health. And if you're gonna plant an apple tree or a chestnut tree or even like a perennial pasture, you need long-term tenure on a piece of land. You need to know that your investment at that beginning to plant that tree or that pasture is gonna pay you back as a business owner. Um, and so that started getting kind of confusing. Like I wasn't expecting to own land, but I also needed land long term that I could stay on and keep stewarding. Um, so in 2016, that was my fourth year of renting land. Kind of early in that year, in the spring, I was having dinner with some friends, and one of them asked me, "So, are you gonna keep farming next year? Are you gonna do it again?" And I heard myself say, "I don't think I can farm next year unless I have permanent land to farm on and someone to farm with me." And so saying that aloud kind of was a catalyst for me to figure both of those things out that year. Yeah, and so the first question is that of the land. And so what happened was really remarkable and really wonderful and very like kind of haphazard or seat of the pants. What happened was there was a 22-acre piece of land that had been conventionally cropped for decades. And it was going up for sale. It was actually going to be put on the auction block and going to be auctioned off. But the neighbor up the road from that piece of land was worried about who might buy it at auction and what use they might put on that land. And so he organized really quickly, within the space of 3 weeks, he organized a group of about 20 people to all put in money and buy the land collectively as an LLC. And it was kind of wild. So he talked to the landowner and she named a price that she wanted for it. And then he raised the money among community members. And so they had this LLC where a group of about 20 people was going to decide what to do with the land. And their initial ideas were to put it into hay to just hold it so that it could stop being tilled. And some people were talking even about putting it into CRP, the Conservation Reserve Program. But I was there as a beginning farmer, and I bought into that LLC from the start with, a small share of it. And I said, this could be a diversified farm. This might be my chance to be a farmer. And so it actually took about 3 years. So this was while I was renting land, but it took about 3 years, but I finally was able to convince both the LLC, the other members of the LLC, that like it could be a diversified farm. And I was able to convince myself that I could own land. So what ended up happening was that I started buying people's shares of this LLC from them. And at some point, I accumulated enough shares. Some people actually gifted me their shares and others sold me their shares at a discount. But I accumulated enough shares so that a 8-acre chunk of the 22-acre piece of land could be deeded to me. And from that point on, I was able to start investing in infrastructure like electricity, a well, a deer fence. And so that all happened, that kind of came together at the end of 2016 and early 2017. So in 2017, I was able to start a vegetable farm on that 8-acre chunk that I had, and then my sheep were grazing the rest of the land, and I was renting it, the rest of that land, from the LLC. So it's a really cool story. The people were so generous in they ended up capping the price of the shares, so no one sold their shares to me for more than they bought it for. So that was a kind of decommodification moment right there. And some people gifted their shares or sold them at a discount too. So we'll come back to that story a little bit too. But I also want to talk about the other part of my ultimatum, which was that I needed someone to farm with. And so luckily enough, I found that same year, my second cousin, Emily Fagan, moved to Decorah to work for a different vegetable farmer. And we connected because, we were distantly related. And I asked her that summer, I was like, hey, do you want to farm with me next year? And she was willing to take that risk. And yeah, it's really funny. So this first picture is of us putting in the first stake for the greenhouse that we built that first spring. But the second picture is one of us, in a field laughing and smiling at each other. And there have totally been people, so many people who think that we are a couple. We are not a romantic couple. Emily's not even gay. And so just so everyone knows that. um, uh, we're a business partnership, and we happen to be distantly related, and we love each other a lot. Yeah. So, but after a year of working together, we just kind of gave ourselves a trial year to decide whether we were going to keep going um, as a partnership in the business. And we realized a few things about what we needed. Ultimately, we needed an exit strategy for both of us. We needed a way to account for our investments in the business so that an exit strategy could work. Um, and we also needed a way to present ourselves to the public that wasn't like we are a family farm couple, because that's very grating when you're not a couple, and explains how we're a business relationship. And so we ended up deciding to call ourselves a worker-owned cooperative. And we made an operating agreement within our LLC. We're technically an LLC, but we made an operating agreement that describes us as a worker-owned cooperative. And so we created an onboarding process. We can bring new owners into our farm business. There's a buy-in that we've set at $5,500, and at that point, someone would join and have equal decision-making power. We won't onboard people until we've worked with them for a couple of years, but yeah, that's our onboarding process. And then our offboarding process is we're keeping an account of what each owner has invested in the farm. And so when that owner retires or leaves the farm, the farm business would owe that amount of capital, that amount of money back to them. So it converts into a loan from the cooperative to the exiting farmer. So that's kind of what we agreed on and decided on as onboarding and offboarding strategies. And so that means that kind of accounting for the capital inputs of the farm are very important for that long-term exit strategy. And then what happened, and this is where commenting comes in. What happened is we realized that people had given us gifts to get this farm started. And I didn't want to take the thousands of dollars that people had given us for my personal benefit or retirement. I wanted those thousands of dollars to belong to the project of having that land farmed well. So I think of it as the gifts given to our farm are accounted for separately with their own capital account, just alongside mine as a worker owner. The gifts to the farm we call it the commons, and it's a capital account, and we know how much of the value of our farm is owned by community. And that means essentially that the next generation of farmers, as they are buying into the farm business, they're not having to cover that amount that has already been gifted to the farm when they buy in. So that's decreasing the price of the land and of the business by the amount of that gift. So yeah, we kind of stumbled into this idea of the commons, but it felt like it currently does feel like a really important way for us to express our values and to kind of have a succession plan for our farm after we're gone that as long as the co-farmers, whoever is there, keep holding that plan and that vision and that value, that can live on generationally, and that gift that people gave us to get started can keep going for decades and centuries. Who knows? So yeah, that's the story of our farm. And then for another little chunk of time, I want to tell you about what we're doing to kind of expand on the work of the Hidden Falls Land LLC. We want to replicate that model. And so we just this fall incorporated the Farmers Land Investment Cooperative. So basically, we're doing the same thing as that original LLC, but we have a little more intention behind it, and we're structured as a cooperative, as an investment cooperative. So, yeah, so it's member based. Each member, here, let me find it. Well, I'll talk about commons first, just as the inspiration. We've been following the agrarian commons and the farmers land trust for a long time. They kind of were figuring out their stuff at the same time as we were figuring out our stuff. So the idea of a commons generally is just a resource, in this case, land, that is shared and managed by a local community for the benefit of that community. And as Christina was talking about, commoning is a totally different paradigm than private land ownership, and it allows for really different possibilities of who can steward land, who can grow food on it, who gets to decide about what happens with that land and on that land. Commoning really spreads out, in my mind, the load of the responsibility for and the possible reward or abundance from the land. And cooperatives are kind of a subset of commoning, or they're a similar thing in terms of the fact that co-ops are economic organizations that exist for member benefit. And so members steward those cooperatives, and members receive the benefit of those cooperatives. And historically, co-ops in the US especially have been in African American communities, just working to gain economic and political power by collectivizing and by working together. It's really powerful history and really important stuff. But yeah, cooperatives operate on this one member, one vote principle, and members of cooperatives, it could be any kind of organization. It could be consumers, it could be producers, it could be worker co-ops like my farm, or it could be investors. So what we're doing now with the Farmers Land Investment Co-op, or FLIC, is we're inviting people in our community to become members of this cooperative, and it costs $250 to become a member, and just one time. And then those members all get votes, and they elect a board who kind of makes the day-to-day decisions of what happens in the cooperative. And then we're on the search for land, land that ideally that we can kind of make an impact on, in terms of maybe converting it from conventional cropping to a more diversified system, the way my farm happened. Or maybe it's simply protecting something that's already a diversified farm, and being able to purchase it from the farmers and then transition it to a new farm. The idea is that we will be kind of a middleman, and we'll slow down the transition time, or the transaction from landowner to new farmer. We'll be in the middle there to kind of make it a little bit more easeful. So this is a very new we're brand new and we haven't done anything yet. So we get to kind of publicly experiment with what's going to happen here. But I'm really excited about that idea. And so, yeah, that's what I've got to talk about today. And I'm happy to delve into discussion shortly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing. It's really exciting to see. Like I said, this I think gives me hope. I know that a lot of us brought a lot of emotions of like nervousness and fear and overwhelm to this place, and those are very real. But it really gives me a lot of hope to see folks like you that are able to build these creative systems that work for us when the other systems just don't work for small farms or are not something we can support. Yeah, I want to just also recognize that there's a lot of self-organizing even happening in the chat. And I think that just speaks to the collective and cooperative nature of how we all came to this session. And yeah, there are a lot of great moments happening between folks across Ohio. I'm loving all the Ohio connecting and folks just looking for other people to bounce these ideas off of. And I'm really excited to continue these conversations after this call in whatever capacity that might look like. I'd also like to thank our interpreters who will be signing off now as we move into a non-recorded discussion session. And yeah, thank you both so much for being here.